Human steadies the alien girl's shaking hands, and the alien girl says her hands remembered his shape. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The ion storm rolled over the abandoned research outpost like a low, humming tide, making the ceiling lights flicker in strange blue pulses that washed across Evan Cole's face as he stepped inside. The air smelled faintly metallic, the kind of crisp cold that nipped at his breath and made small clouds form each time he exhaled. His boots scraped over the dusty floor, echoing down the long corridor as if the whole place were holding its breath. He had come here for a simple equipment retrieval, nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, just in and out work so he could get off this isolated moon before the next transport window closed. But then he heard it, soft, uneven, like someone trying to steady their own breathing. Evan paused, his hand hovering near the flashlight clipped to his belt, listening again. There it was, a faint clatter of metal followed by the smallest tremor in the air. He moved toward the sound, each step slow, careful, letting the dim emergency lights guide him. At the corridor's end, near a cracked observation window, he finally saw her. A girl. No, not human, standing half in shadow with her back pressed against the wall. Her skin had a soft blue-silver glow that caught the trembling lights above, and her long hair moved gently as if stirred by a breeze he couldn't feel. Her hands shook so badly that the small diagnostic tool she held rattled against her palms. Evan froze, not wanting to startle her, but she had already noticed him. Her eyes lifted, wide and bright like polished glass, watching him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his voice low and steady, the way he might talk to someone recovering from a panic episode. "I'm not here to harm you. I didn't even know anyone else was in this facility." She tried to speak, but her voice caught, thin and strained, and the tool slipped from her fingers, clinking gently against the floor. Her hands trembled harder now, not from cold, he realized, but from something deeper, stress, shock, maybe both. Evan stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop him if she wanted. She didn't. Instead, she let him kneel in front of her, his hands open, offering calm without pressure. "May I?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. He reached out and took her hands in his, warm skin against cool, trembling palms, guiding her fingers into stillness. The shaking eased almost immediately. Her breath unhitched. Her eyes softened. And in that fragile silence, with the storm humming outside and their hands joined in the dim glow, she whispered, almost to herself, "My hands, they remembered your shape." For a long moment Evan did not move, letting her hands rest inside his as the storm outside softened to a distant rumble. Her fingers, cool and smooth with a faint metallic sheen, no longer trembled. He felt her steadying breath warm the thin space between them, and for the first time he noticed the faint glow along the lines of her palms, like bioluminescent veins responding to calm instead of fear. She watched their joined hands as if they were something fragile and newly discovered. When she finally looked up, her gaze held a quiet clarity that had not been there moments before. "You are human," she said softly, almost curious rather than cautious. Evan nodded. "Evan Cole, maintenance engineer." She blinked once, processing that. "Lyrian Vera," she replied, her accent carrying a gentle resonance. "Most people call me Lyra." Her voice settled a little, steadier now, though she still kept her hands in his, as though letting go might unravel the fragile balance they had found. Evan let her decide when to pull away. She did not. The hallway lights flickered again, and Evan glanced toward the far end where a patch of ceiling panels sagged under storm strain. "This place is not stable," he said. "We should move somewhere safer." Lyra nodded, but when she tried to step forward her knees buckled slightly. The storm must have drained her, or maybe she had been alone far too long inside a failing structure. Evan kept one of her hands lightly in his, guiding her. Without rushing. "There is a supply alcove just ahead," she murmured. "I tried to reach it earlier, but the energy surges triggered my neural response." He heard the hesitation in her words and understood enough not to press. She was not just physically shaken. Whatever shock she had gone through had left her body reacting in ways she could not fully control. They walked slowly down the corridor, their footsteps barely disturbing the dust on the floor. The ambient lights glowed warm amber now, reflecting softly on Lyra's blue-silver skin. She glanced at him once, studying him with quiet curiosity, as though trying to match the warmth in his hands to the presence beside her. When they reached the alcove, Evan manually opened the sliding door. The hinges made a tired groan, but the room inside was intact, a small storage space with emergency chairs and a wall panel still running on backup power. Lyra sank gently onto the nearest seat, exhaling as though finally letting go of a weight she had carried for hours. Evan remained close, not wanting to crowd her, but she lifted her hand slightly, as if searching for his again. He offered it without a word. Her fingers curled into his palm with surprising care, not gripping, just resting, like she was memorizing the contact. "Your presence calms the tremor," she said quietly. "I do not understand it, but it is real." Evan sat beside her, close enough for their shoulders to almost touch. "Maybe you just needed someone with you," he said. She considered that, eyes shifting with a soft shimmer. "Or maybe," she whispered, "my hands simply remembered what safety felt like." The storm outside faded to a distant hum, leaving only the soft rhythm of their breaths in the warm glow of the alcove as Lyra's trembling eased into stillness once more. The alcove's soft amber light buzzed faintly, matching the slow and even rhythm of Lyra's breathing as she rested with her hand still settled inside Evan's. The storm outside had faded into a low, distant hum, like the sky itself was finally exhaling. Evan watched her for a moment, not out of concern, but out of a quiet curiosity he did not fully understand. She seemed stronger now, steadier, yet she held his hand with the same gentle care as someone holding a warm object they were afraid to. "Drop. Your world has a very sharp cold," Lyra murmured, her gaze lifting toward the narrow window where frost bloomed along the glass. "The temperature swings here are difficult for my species." Evan followed her eyes. The frost traced branching lines across the surface, glowing faintly with reflected storm light. "This moon is not exactly welcoming," he said. "I only came because my team needed someone to retrieve old data units." Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying him with that same quiet intensity she had shown before. "You came alone?" He nodded. "The shuttle dropped me off 6 hours ago. I was supposed to be done by now." She looked down at their hands again, thumb brushing lightly over the back of his knuckles as if testing how real the contact was. "Time does strange things when fear takes hold," she said softly. Evan did not push her to explain, but she continued on her own, her voice barely above a whisper. "The energy surges triggered a memory loop. My neural pathways can echo sensations when I am overwhelmed." The tremor was not just fear. It was memory trying to protect itself. He listened, sensing the weight behind her words. Lyra's eyes, bright and shimmering, flicked toward him with something almost apologetic. "When you touched my hands, the echo changed. It followed your rhythm instead of the storm's." Evan felt a subtle warmth rise in his chest, not from her words, but from the steadiness with which she spoke them. "Then I am glad I was here," he said simply. Lyra breathed out slowly, her shoulders relaxing as if she had been holding tension for hours. "There is another reason we should not stay," she said after a moment. "The core regulators in this facility are unstable. This place was abandoned before they could be properly shut down. Another surge could activate the thermal systems." Evan glanced at the door. "Then we move now." She nodded, but her hand tightened around his before releasing. The small pause she gave felt intentional, like a promise that she would take the strength with her even when they were no longer touching. She stood carefully, her knees steady this time, though he remained close in case she needed support. The hallway beyond the alcove felt different now, less hostile, as if the storm had taken the sharpest edge of danger and carried it away. Evan walked at her side, matching her pace. Their footsteps echoed softly through the corridor, the amber lights warming their silhouettes as they moved deeper into the structure. Lyra kept one hand near him, not quite touching but close enough that he could feel her presence like a quiet hum. "The exit hatch is 2 corridors down," she said. "If the systems have not locked it." "If they have?" Evan replied. We will figure it out. She glanced at him then, the smallest smile forming, gentle and almost surprised. You say that as if solutions are waiting around every corner. Sometimes they are, he said. Sometimes they look like someone who just needed steady hands. Her smile held a moment longer, glowing faintly in the warm light as they continued forward, step by careful step, toward whatever waited beyond the damaged halls. The corridor ahead glowed with a dim gold wash as the backup lights fought to stay alive, flickering just enough to guide Evan and Lyra forward. The air felt warmer here, touched by the lingering heat from the storm outside, and their footsteps stirred faint dust that drifted like slow-moving sparks. Lyra kept close beside him, not out of fear but out of a quiet awareness that his presence steadied her, the same way her calm focus grounded him. When they reached the intersection, a soft hum pulsed through the floor, a vibration that traveled up through Evan's boots. Lyra paused, eyes narrowing slightly. The regulators are charging again, she said. We have limited time. Evan exhaled slowly. Then the exit hatch cannot be far. She nodded and stepped ahead, her movements careful and deliberate, the soft glow of her skin reflecting off the metal walls. The hum grew steadier, warmer, like a slow heartbeat deep within the structure. As they turned the corner, Lyra froze. The hatch door stood only 20 feet away, but the control panel beside it flickered with red warning lights, its display struggling to stabilize. Evan stepped forward, scanning the interface. It is not locked, he said, but the power is unstable. If it fails completely, the manual release might seal instead of open. Lyra watched him, her eyes following the way his hands moved across the controls. He worked with patience, adjusting settings with light touches as though calming a system rather than forcing it. You are gentle with machines, she said, voice thoughtful. I guess I have always believed things respond better when you do not force them, he replied. She tilted her head, a faint smile touching her lips. Including people? He met her eyes briefly, then looked back at the panel, feeling a warmth rise in his chest that had nothing to do with the facility's systems. Especially people, he said. The panel beeped softly, the red warning lights shifting to a dim orange. Evan stepped back, exhaling. We can open it, but we should be ready to move quickly. Lyra placed her hand on the edge of the door, her fingertips glowing faintly as she read the residual energy. I can stabilize the charge for a moment, she said. My field can dampen the fluctuation. Evan looked at her hands, remembering the way they had trembled before, and the way they had steadied inside his. Are you sure? Yes, she said softly. Because I am not alone this time. She pressed her palm gently to the panel. A cool shimmer spread from her skin across the metal surface, smoothing the flickering lights into a steady glow. Evan pulled the manual release. The door responded immediately, sliding open with a smooth hiss that echoed down the corridor. Cold air swept in, brushing across their faces. The sky outside carried the last remnants of the storm, streaks of pale blue breaking through scattered clouds. Lyra lowered her hand slowly, the glow fading from her skin. She swayed just slightly, and Evan reached out without thinking. She steadied herself with a hand on his forearm, her touch light but intentional. Your steadiness transfers, she murmured, her voice soft. Even without holding my hands. Evan felt a quiet smile forming. Then let us keep moving. She nodded, her expression warm in the cool light, and together they stepped into the open air, leaving the trembling walls of the outpost behind. Cold air wrapped around Evan and Lyra as they stepped outside. The sky stretched wide above them with streaks of pale blue cutting through the thinning clouds. The ground beneath their boots was firm but dusted with a delicate layer of frost that sparkled under the muted light. The storm had left behind a clean stillness, the kind that made every sound feel sharper and every breath feel more present. Lyra paused just beyond the hatch, her gaze sweeping across the frozen landscape. The silver blue of her skin reflected the faint sunlight, giving her an almost ethereal glow against the stark terrain. Your world's moons are quiet, she said softly. Almost too quiet. Evan scanned the horizon. The shuttle landing pad lay less than a half-mile away, its tall beacon tower blinking in slow intervals. The quiet does not last, he replied. Once the storm clears, the temperature drops fast. We should keep moving. She nodded and fell into step beside him. Their movements were unhurried but deliberate, the crunch of frost underfoot keeping a steady rhythm. The hum of the outpost faded behind them, replaced by the low whistle of wind sliding across the barren ground. As they walked, Lyra kept one hand lightly near her chest, as if feeling the residual echo of her earlier tremor. Evan noticed the way her breathing synced with his pace, steady and even, grounding her with each footfall. When the storm first hit, she said after a quiet moment, I thought the entire structure would collapse. I could feel the surges through the metal. They were loud inside my mind. Evan glanced her way. You felt it more strongly than I did. She nodded. My species senses energy through conductive frequencies. When systems overload, it reads like distorted emotion to us. The confusion can echo until it becomes difficult to separate past memory from present danger. He listened, absorbing the way her voice carried both knowledge and vulnerability. Was that why your hands tremble? She hesitated, then spoke with careful honesty. Partly. The rest was loneliness. The wind tugged gently at her hair, sending strands shifting like soft metal threads. I did not expect anyone to come. When your voice reached me, it silenced the echo for a moment. When you touched my hands, it stabilized fully. Evan felt her gaze on him, curious and searching. Sometimes, he said quietly, a person just needs another person close enough to make them feel real again. Her steps slowed slightly, not stopping, but pausing as if absorbing the simple truth. That is an uncommon perspective among humans, she said. Many value independence above all else. I think independence is easier when you do not have to face everything by yourself, he replied. Lyra's eyes softened, the soft silver reflections in them mixing with the pale sky. Your steadiness, she said, is not just physical. It reaches places I did not realize were still trembling. He looked toward the landing pad ahead. We are almost there. She exhaled a slow breath. Good. My transport beacon should still respond. As they approached, the beacon tower pulsed with gentle blue light, steady and welcoming. Lyra stopped just short of it, turning to Evan with a quiet expression he could not quite read. Before we signal, she said softly, there is something I want to understand. When you held my hands, did it calm you as well? Evan met her eyes, feeling the chill wind settle around them like a soft boundary. Yes, he said. It did. The openness in his voice made something shift in her posture, a subtle warmth blooming in her expression. Then, she whispered, perhaps it was not only my memory that responded. The wind circled around them in a soft ribbon of cold air, carrying the last traces of the storm across the open plain. The beacon tower pulsed steadily beside them, casting calm blue light that washed over Lyra's silver blue skin and made her look almost weightless against the pale horizon. Evan stood close, his breath forming thin clouds that drifted quickly away on the breeze. Lyra held his gaze for a long moment after his quiet admission, as if she was measuring the shape of the truth inside his voice. Her expression was not startled, only thoughtful, almost relieved. Then I was not imagining it, she said softly. The stillness that settled between us. It was shared. Evan nodded slightly. It felt like something aligned, for just a moment. Her eyes lowered, not in shyness but in contemplation. She stepped closer to the beacon, reaching for the activation panel. Her fingers hovered above it, glowing faintly as they sensed the field, but she did not press the control yet. Instead, she turned back to him with a slow inhale. In my culture, she said, hands are used only for essential contact. Our species is sensitive to memory impressions. A single touch can last for days. We do not reach for others without intention. Evan listened, feeling the weight of her words settle gently between them. Then why did my touch calm you? She took a small step toward him, stopping just within arm's reach. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, brushing it softly across her cheek like a whisper. Because it did not feel like an intrusion, she said. It felt like recognition. Evan's heartbeat steadied in his chest, not faster, not slower, just grounded in a way he could not explain. Recognition of what? He asked quietly. Lyra studied him with eyes that reflected the pale sky and the pulsing beacon light. Of safety, she said. Of someone who sees rather than fears. Someone who steadies without demanding. Her voice softened. It is rare for us. She finally touched the beacon panel. A soft tone filled the air, followed by a shimmer of light as the transmitter activated, sending a signal toward the upper atmosphere. Evan watched the glow ripple outward, spreading like a faint wave across the sky. Lyra turned back to him, her expression calm but layered with unspoken thoughts. My transport will receive the signal within minutes, she said. When they arrive, you will be asked questions. About you, he asked. She nodded. About my condition. About why I was here. About the tremor. She paused, folding her hands together in front of her. And about why it stopped. Evan felt a quiet warmth settle through him. What will you tell them? Lyra looked down at her hands, her fingers brushing lightly along the spaces where his had steadied them. That the storm overwhelmed me, she said. That I encountered a human engineer who helped me navigate the structure safely. She lifted her gaze to him, and that his presence stabilized my neural echoes. Evan breathed in the cold air, letting it settle in his lungs. That sounds honest enough. Lyra hesitated again, the faintest shift in her posture. There is something else, she said. My people may assume your contact with me was intentional. Evan blinked. Intentional how? She shook her head gently. Nothing inappropriate. Just meaningful. They may think you were trying to imprint a memory response. Evan let out a soft breath. I was just trying to help. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low and steady. I know that. But sometimes meaning forms even when we do not plan it. The beacon flashed brighter, signaling incoming transport. Lyra's eyes held his, steady and warm against the cold air. Evan, she said softly, whatever happens next, I do not wish our memory together to fade quickly. He felt that message settle into him, quiet and anchoring. Neither do I, he answered. And as the sky above them shimmered with approaching light, Lyra's hands curled gently at her sides, as if remembering his shape even without touching him. The approaching transport cut through the upper atmosphere like a quiet shimmer, its soft light spreading across the pale sky in gentle ripples. Evan and Lyra stood together near the beacon tower, the cold wind curling around them in slow spirals. The hum of the transport grew steadier, a calm resonance that blended with the rhythmic pulse of the beacon. Lyra's silver-blue skin reflected both lights, creating a soft halo along her features. She watched the sky with a composed expression, but Evan sensed the subtle tension in her shoulders, a stillness that was not quite natural. Your transport is close, he said quietly. She nodded, her voice low. Yes, they will land just beyond the ridge. It will only take a few minutes. Evan looked out across the frost-covered plain. The vastness of it made their moment feel small but strangely important, like the cold air held their silence without letting it slip away. Will they understand what happened? He asked. Lyra's eyes softened. They will investigate. They will ask. But they will not feel what I felt. She paused, her gaze drifting toward his hands for a brief moment before returning to the horizon. They do not know the quiet inside your presence. The wind shifted, brushing a faint whisper across the ground. Evan stepped a small inch closer, enough to offer warmth without assuming anything. I did not do anything extraordinary, he said. You reached for calm. I was just there. She studied him, her expression thoughtful and steady. You underestimate the impact of simple presence, she replied. Where I come from, emotional intention carries weight. You offered steadiness without expecting anything. That is rare, even among my people. The transport descended lower, its glow illuminating the frost in long arcs of pale blue light. Lyra's hair lifted as the air stirred, strands catching the glow like thin ribbons of silver. She turned to Evan, her posture straight but her voice gentle. When they take me aboard, she said, you may be asked to remain for questioning. They will want to ensure there was no internal interference within the facility. Evan nodded. I will cooperate. I have nothing to hide. I know, she said softly. That is why I am telling you this. He felt her meaning settle into the quiet between them. She was not warning him. She was preparing him. The transport's landing gear touched down with a soft vibration that traveled through the frozen ground. A gentle beam of light extended outward, marking the safe path for boarding. Lyra turned toward it, but she hesitated. Her hands remained relaxed at her sides, but her fingers shifted slightly, as though remembering the warmth they had found earlier. She faced him fully, her expression calm and open. Before I go, she said, I wish to offer clarity. My people may see your touch as something intentional, something deliberate, but I want you to know the truth of my experience. Evan listened, the cold settling around him like a thin shell. What truth is that? Lyra stepped closer, close enough that he could see the fine shimmer along her skin, the faint reflection of the beacon light inside her eyes. The tremor did not stop because you solved a problem, she said. It stopped because your presence aligned with mine. That is not a biological accident. It felt like a choice. Evan held her gaze, hearing the quiet honesty layered in her voice. A choice made by who? She answered without hesitation. By both of us. The wind fell still for a moment, as if giving space for the words to rest. Then the transport door opened with a soft chime. Lyra glanced toward it, then back at him. Her eyes held a steady warmth that seemed to linger even before she spoke again. Remember this moment, she whispered, because my hands will. And as she stepped toward the waiting light, the air between them carried the echo of her words like a gentle imprint that refused to fade. The transport's soft light framed Lyra's silhouette as she walked up the narrow ramp, her steps steady but touched with a quiet reluctance that the cold wind could not hide. Evan stood where she had left him, the frost crunching lightly under his boots as he shifted his weight, watching her ascend toward the open doorway. The hum of the transport blended with the fading whistle of the wind, creating a strange calm that settled over the frozen plain. When Lyra reached the top of the ramp, she paused, her head turning slightly as though sensing the echo of their moment, still lingering between them. Then she disappeared inside, and the transport door sealed with a gentle hiss. Evan released a slow breath, feeling the cold air pull it away almost instantly. A few seconds later, a different door on the underside of the vessel opened, and a tall figure stepped down with measured movements. The newcomer's skin was a muted shade of silver, with faint geometric patterns that pulsed softly across their surface. Their eyes held a clarity similar to Lyra's, but sharper, more analytical. Evan straightened instinctively as the figure approached. Evan Cole, the individual said, voice calm and even. I am Advisor Saran of the Vera delegation. I am here to ask a few questions regarding your encounter. Evan nodded. Of course. I will answer whatever you need. Saran's gaze flicked briefly toward the outpost in the distance, then back to him. Our instruments detected a significant energy surge within the structure during the storm. You were inside at the time, yes? Yes, Evan replied. I went in to retrieve equipment. I found Lyra in distress. Saran's eyes narrowed slightly in focus. Her neural readings indicate a stabilized echo pattern shortly after contact with you. Evan felt the cold air tighten around him. She said my presence helped. Saran studied him for a long moment, not accusing, simply observing. For someone of her physiology, that is unusual. Stabilization through external presence typically requires deliberate intent. Evan met their gaze steadily. I was not trying to manipulate anything. She was frightened. I just did what I hoped would calm her. A faint pulse of soft blue traveled along the markings on Saran's skin, almost like a visual exhale. Lyra spoke well of you, Saran said quietly. She rarely allows physical contact of that nature. Evan looked toward the transport, warmth threading through the cold. I did not force anything. She reached back. Saran's expression shifted, the edges softening. Then it aligns with her report. The advisor glanced up as the beacon pulsed again, signaling that the interior systems were ready. Your cooperation is appreciated. There will be no further inquiry required of you. Evan exhaled, relieved but uncertain. Is she all right now? Saran's eyes softened. More than all right. Her neural patterns are steadier than they have been for several cycles. The advisor paused, their voice dropping to a more personal tone. She requested something before returning to the medbay. Evan waited, the cold wind brushing against his jacket. Saran looked at him with an expression somewhere between understanding and curiosity. She asked that you remain here until she could speak to you again. Evan felt something settle in his chest, warm despite the cold around him. I can wait, he said quietly. Saran nodded once, then gestured toward the transport ramp. Then come aboard. She wished for you not to be left in the cold. As Evan followed the advisor toward the rising ramp, the frost crunched softly underfoot, and the beacon pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm that matched the quiet certainty growing inside him. The interior of the transport was warm, carrying a soft hum that flowed through the floor panels like a steady heartbeat. Evan followed Advisor Saran down a narrow corridor lined with gentle blue lighting. The air inside felt different from the frozen plain outside, almost soothing, as if the atmosphere itself had been engineered to calm the senses. Saran stopped near a sliding door and glanced back at him. She is inside, the advisor said. Her neural rhythms have stabilized further since boarding. Evan nodded, trying to steady his own breathing. The door opened with a quiet sweep, revealing a small chamber lit by low silver light. Lyra sat on a cushioned platform near the center, her posture relaxed but alert. The faint glow along her skin had returned, soft and even, like moonlight brushed across water. When she looked up, the relief in her expression was unmistakable. "Evan," she said, her voice warm, carrying none of the trembling notes from before. He stepped in slowly, not wanting to assume anything. "Advisor Saran said you wanted to see me." Lyra's fingers curled lightly on her knees before she rose to her feet. "Yes," she said. "I did." She approached him with slow, steady steps, her movements smooth now that the storm's echo no longer clung to her. The room seemed to quiet around them, letting their breath settle into the same gentle rhythm they had shared in the outpost. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "Not for finding me, not for guiding me to safety, but for the way you stayed." Evan met her gaze. "Anyone would have helped." Lyra shook her head once. "Not like you did. You did not treat my trembling as a weakness. You did not treat my silence as avoidance. You simply offered your steadiness and waited for my mind to align again." She lifted her hand slightly, as if testing the air between them. "Most people rush. You did not." Evan felt the quiet sincerity in her words settle into the stillness. "I just wanted you to feel safe," he said. Lyra stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint shimmer along the lines of her palms. "And that," she whispered, "is why the echo responded to you." He hesitated. "What does that mean?" Lyra looked down at her hands, turning them slightly so the light traced the delicate patterns on her skin. "My people imprint memory through physical contact. Not just events, but emotional resonance. Earlier, when the storm overwhelmed me, my neural pathways reached for a stabilizing pattern." She lifted her gaze again, gentle and clear. "They chose you." Evan felt the weight of that in the quietest part of him. "And what does that mean for you?" Her voice softened, becoming almost a breath. "It means I will remember your steadiness long after the tremor fades. It means your presence left a place of calm inside me." She took one more step forward, close enough now that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hands rested lightly at her sides, glowing in soft pulses that matched the low lights of the chamber. "And if you allow it," she said, "I would like that memory to last." Evan held her gaze, feeling the room narrow to just the two of them, the faint hum of the transport folding into the background. He answered in a quiet voice that carried the same stillness he had offered her before. "I would like that too." Lyra exhaled, a gentle sound of relief, and the glow along her palms brightened for a moment as if echoing the feeling. She raised one hand slowly, deliberately, offering it without pressing it toward him. The gesture was simple, quiet, but full of meaning. Evan lifted his own hand to meet hers. Their palms touched lightly, steady and warm. No trembling, no hesitation, just the silent connection of two people choosing the same moment. And in that stillness, the memory imprinted, soft, calm, and lasting, like the echo of a steady heartbeat in a quiet room.